Zarethval had fought in more wars than he could count. He had watched cities burn under the twin suns of distant worlds. He had ordered fleets to crush enemy forces until there was nothing left but silence. He knew war. He understood its patterns, its rules. Armies fought until one side broke. Leaders negotiated or surrendered. There was always an end. That was the truth of war. Until he came to Earth. From the bridge of his flagship, Zareth looked down at the blue and green planet, turning slowly below. It looked fragile, peaceful, the kind of world that fell quickly. His intelligence reports had been clear. A young species, scattered nations, primitive by galactic standards. They would fight, yes, but their weapons were outdated, their technology centuries behind. This was supposed to be a simple campaign. He had already planned the victory speech. But then, the first human resistance began. The initial strike on the city had gone as predicted. Orbital bombardment leveled key defenses. Alien dropships filled the sky like a swarm of steel insects, descending through smoke and fire. Zareth's soldiers, tall, armored, disciplined, spread through the streets in perfect formation. He expected the humans to scatter. He expected them to run. Instead, they charged. Through the visor of his command feed, Zareth saw something strange. A squad of human soldiers, cut off from their main force, faced a group of his warriors in a narrow street. They had no chance. Their weapons were outdated rifles, their armor a little more than fabric and plates. One by one, they were hit, collapsing in the dust and rubble. But even after losing half their number, the rest kept moving forward. When their rifles ran dry, they switched to sidearms. When their sidearms failed, they picked up broken pieces of metal and swung them like axes. One human, bleeding from a wound that should have left him unconscious, leapt onto an alien's back and drove a knife between the armor plates until both of them fell. Zareth leaned closer to the screen, watching the chaos. This was not strategy. This was not efficiency. It was something else, something fierce, something that burned hot and bright. These humans did not fight to win. They fought because they refused to stop. In another street, his soldiers encountered civilians, untrained, unarmed except for kitchen knives and tools. Instead of fleeing, they blocked alleys with overturned cars and hurled Molotov fire at the advancing troops. Smoke and flames filled the air, confusing the alien sensors. A group of children slipped through the smoke to pull a wounded soldier. To safety, Zareth had never seen anything like it. Zillions in other wars hid, begged for mercy, surrendered quickly. Here even those who could not fight directly were finding ways to resist. The reports coming in were troubling. In the first hours, alien casualties were higher than predicted. Tire patrols were going silent. The humans were using their own city against him, collapsing buildings to block armored walkers, flooding tunnels to drown his scouts, setting traps in the rubble. They were improvising faster than his tactical AI could adapt. Zareth told himself it was just the first wave. The humans would tire. Their courage would burn out when the reality of defeat set in. It always happened. Deep inside, a small, unfamiliar feeling began to stir. Not fear, not yet, but something close. Unease. Night fell over the smoking ruins of the city. Zareth expected the fighting to slow. Instead, it intensified. Human squads moved like shadows, striking and vanishing before his troops could respond. Fires burned in every direction, casting the streets in an angry red glow. In one feed, an alien soldier stumbled backward, his armor scorched. Behind him, a human emerged from the darkness. No armor, face streaked with ash, eyes blazing. He carried nothing but a broken steel pipe. But the way he moved made even the veteran alien hesitate. On the bridge, one of Zareth's lieutenants turned to him. "Commander," the officer said, his voice tight, "these humans, they do not retreat, they do not surrender, even when surrounded." Zareth did not answer immediately, was watching another screen, a view from above the city. Explosions flared like sparks in the darkness. Every time the aliens tightened their grip, the humans slipped through their fingers, striking from a new angle. They were fighting as if defeat was not even a possibility, as if death was not a threat. It was madness. And yet, somehow it was working. Hours into the invasion, Zeroth finally understood that his enemy was not the Earth's military, not its fractured governments. His true enemy was the human will to fight. A force so raw and relentless that it seemed to grow stronger the more they bled. He stood in silence, his clawed hands resting on the rail. The war was only beginning, but already the neat strategies and flawless predictions were falling apart. His troops were disciplined, his weapons superior, numbers overwhelming, and still the humans were holding ground. A thought came, unbidden, unwelcome to his mind. If they fight like this when they're losing, what will they be like when they start to win? The city was burning, but the humans moved through it like it was their home, because it was. Every alley, every broken wall, every tunnel beneath the streets was a weapon in their hands. Zerath had fought in the jungles of Darvos, in the icy caves of Branth, and in the endless deserts of Thren. In every campaign, the battlefield had belonged to his forces the moment they landed. But here on Earth, it was as if the planet itself had chosen sides, and it had not chosen him. From his command station, he watched his squads push deeper into the city. Its signatures glowed against the ruined skyline, but the humans never stayed in one place long enough to be cornered. They struck, vanished, and struck again. A patrol would turn a corner and find a street empty, and then an explosion from a rooftop would drop half the squad before they could react. The survivors would scramble for cover, only to find their exits blocked by fire or falling debris. It was not just soldiers doing this. It was shopkeepers, mechanics, students, parents, all fighting with the same relentless fury. One report showed a particularly brutal engagement. Near the city's central rail yard, a unit of armored aliens advanced between rusting train cars, scanning for movement. They found nothing until the train itself roared to life. The humans had powered it up remotely. The massive engine, loaded with fuel and explosives, slammed into the alien formation at full speed. The explosion lit the night like a second sun, tearing the rail yard apart. Sensors caught flashes of human figures sprinting away through the smoke, their faces streaked with soot, their eyes bright with something between rage and triumph. Zareth's second in command tried to keep him focused on the broader picture. "We are still advancing," the officer said. "By dawn, the city will be under our control." But the words felt hollow. Zareth knew what control looked like. This was something else. Every block his forces took seemed to cost more lives than it should. And worse, the humans were learning. Every tactic that worked once against them failed the second time. They adapted like predators, fast and dangerous. By midnight, the enemy's resistance should have been broken. Instead, it had sharpened. Alien squads reported hearing strange noises in the darkness, whispered signals. Footsteps moving in perfect coordination, the creak of ropes above. Then a body would fall from a rooftop with a knife buried deep in the joint of its armor. Some soldiers began firing into shadows just to make themselves feel safer. Zareth recognized the signs. His troops were losing their confidence. Fear was slipping in. Near the river, a group of human fighters was cornered against a collapsed bridge. The aliens closed in, weapons ready. Certain a kill was moments away. But the humans didn't surrender. They didn't even slow down. They charged straight into the alien line, screaming, firing, throwing grenades with bare hands until they were almost close enough to touch. The fighting turned into chaos. Hand to hand, armor against skin, steel against bone. By the end, the aliens had taken the ground. But half their number lay broken among the human dead. Watching it through his visor feed, Zareth felt something heavy in his chest. It wasn't pity. It wasn't admiration. It was the slow, creeping understanding that his perfect plan was cracking. War was supposed to follow rules. The stronger force won. A disciplined army crushed the desperate one. But here, desperation was a weapon, and the humans wielded it with a mastery that defied logic. The worst came in the early hours before dawn. An alien artillery unit set up on the outskirts of the city, ready to level the remaining strongholds. It was their most advanced weaponry, shielded by layers of security. Within minutes, the humans had found it. They didn't attack with tanks or fighter craft, they attacked with shadows. A dozen figures slipped through the ruins, cutting through patrols, climbing over walls, and then disappearing into the camp. Moments later, the artillery barrels erupted in flames. The explosion tore through the alien lines, destroying their own forward base. Zareth's communications officer was shouting, trying to make sense of the chaos. They are inside our positions. They are sabotaging equipment. The feed cut to static, and then came the voice. Not from his officers, not from his troops, from the humans. It was an open broadcast, audible on every channel his forces used. It's a single voice, calm but edged with steel. You don't know what war is, but you will. Zeroth stood very still, staring at the burning city below. I had thought the humans were merely defending their home. But now he realized they were doing something more dangerous. They were teaching him a lesson. One fight at a time. The first day of the invasion was ending. The war for Earth had only just begun. Somewhere, deep inside, Zeroth knew that for the first time in his long military career, he might be facing an enemy he could not break. The dawn came without warmth. Smoke hung over the ruined skyline, turning the first light of day into a sickly haze. The streets were quiet, too quiet. And Zareth knew enough about war to understand that silence could be deadlier than any bombardment. His forces had taken control of several districts during the night, but each one had cost more than the last. The humans were not retreating. They were rearranging the battlefield, turning every new position into a trap. From the command station's upper deck, he could see the city stretched out like a maze of broken stone and metal. Somewhere down, there they were waiting. They had no heavy tanks, no orbital support, no advanced armor, yet they were fighting as if they had a fleet at their back. His analysts reported that human casualties were high, but the numbers didn't comfort him. Numbers didn't tell the whole story. If they had, this war would already be over. Reports came in from the southern sector first. A convoy of alien transports, loaded with supplies and wounded soldiers, had been moving through the industrial zone. The humans didn't attack the front or the rear. They attacked the middle, cutting the convoy in half. Small, fast teams appeared out of the ruins, firing from multiple angles, using smoke to blind sensors. Within minutes, the convoy dissolved into chaos. By the time reinforcements arrived, every transport in the center was destroyed. The supplies gone, and the wounded soldiers missing. That wasn't war. That was dismantling an army piece by piece. Zareth had faced guerrilla tactics before, but never with this precision. The humans knew exactly where to strike to cause the most damage. Worse, they weren't just killing, they were sending messages. Later that morning, Scout Unit reported a strange find near the northern barricades, alien weapons and armor stacked neatly in the middle of an empty street. No human fighters were in sight. The gear had been cleaned, almost polished, as if placed there on purpose. Attached to it was a piece of paper, handwritten in human script. It read, "You are not ready for us." Zeroth crumpled the message. In his hand, they were mocking him now, not with boasts, but with facts. Every hour he stayed on this planet, the humans were growing bolder. In the afternoon, the alien forces attempted a coordinated sweep of the old financial district, hoping to crush several known pockets of resistance. The streets there were narrow, the buildings tall, perfect for an ambush, and the humans took full advantage. Explosives hidden in walls, snipers firing from windows, even entire buildings collapsing onto advancing troops. The alien formations broke apart as soldiers scrambled for cover that didn't exist. Through the smoke, Roth's drones captured fleeting glimpses of their enemy. They moved like predators, low, fast, coordinated. Their faces were painted with streaks of ash and dirt, their eyes fixed on their targets. They didn't hesitate. They didn't fear. Even when wounded, they fought until they could no longer. Move, one squad leader described it over, comes in a strained voice. They don't fight for territory. They fight for each other. Kill one, the rest come for you, like you've set the world on fire. By evening, Zareth had lost more troops than in any other single day of his career. He tried to convince himself it was only a temporary setback, that superior technology would eventually crush them. But in his mind, the memory of that human broadcast still echoed. You don't know what war is, but you will. That night, the humans struck again, this time against the alien airfield on the edge of the city. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by automated turrets and shield generators. But the humans didn't attack from the front. They tunneled beneath it. No one knew how long they had been digging. But when the ground erupted in the middle of the airfield, dozens of them poured out, carrying explosives and makeshift weapons. Within minutes, alien dropships were burning, fuel stores were exploding, and the shield generators lay in pieces. When the chaos cleared, Zareth reviewed the security feeds. He froze the image on a single human figure, a woman, face hidden by a scarf, standing amid the wreckage. She stared directly into the camera, lifted a single finger to her lips in the universal gesture for silence, and then vanished into the smoke. It was not just a war anymore. It was a hunt. And Zareth, for the first time, felt like prey. The city was dying, but not fast enough for Zareth's liking. Every day his forces stayed here. The planet seemed to turn against them. Roads collapsed without warning. Supply lines were ambushed. Patrols vanished without a trace. It was as if the humans had woven themselves into the ruins, becoming part of the streets, the shadows, the very air. The alien command council demanded faster results. They wanted the human resistance broken within days, not weeks. Zareth gave the order to push deeper into the heart of the city. Heavy armor rolled forward, escorted by drones scanning for heat signatures and movement. Above, fighter crafts circled, their sensors sweeping every alley. For a while, it seemed the humans had withdrawn. The streets were eerily empty, the windows dark, the ruins silent. It felt almost too easy, and that feeling gnawed at Zareth's mind. He had studied human tactics for months before the invasion. He knew they didn't give ground without reason then. Just as his forward columns reached the central plaza, the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a chain of detonations so perfectly timed that the entire square became a death trap. Buildings collapsed inward, crushing tanks beneath tons of stone and steel. From the dust, human fighters emerged like ghosts, striking the scattered alien troops before vanishing again. Zareth's comm channels exploded with frantic reports. Entire units were being cut off. Communications were jammed. Drones went dark one by one, their feeds replaced by static. Somewhere in the chaos, the humans were speaking over open frequencies, not in threats, but in short, calm instructions. To one another. Every order was precise, every movement planned. They're not reacting, one alien officer said, voice shaking. They're executing something they've prepared for weeks. It wasn't just an ambush. It was the closing of a trap. The plaza was supposed to be the aliens' staging ground for a final push. Instead, it became a slaughterhouse. Heavy armor burned. Infantry scattered. Snipers fired from unseen positions, each shot finding its mark. Even when the aliens tried to regroup, sudden walls of fire lit by gasoline poured into the streets, forced them into kill zones. In the command vehicle, Zareth watched the disaster unfold on his tactical map. Red icons blinked out one after another. He wanted to call a retreat, but retreat meant admitting defeat, and defeat was unthinkable. Yet his soldiers were dying faster than they could be replaced. Hours later, as the battle raged, a strange sound cut through the gunfire, the sharp, steady beat of drums. They echoed through the streets, growing louder as if an entire army was marching toward them. But the humans were already there. The drums were not to rally their own fighters. They were to make the aliens hear what was coming. Through the smoke, shapes began to appear, hundreds of human fighters moving as one, advancing with grim determination. They weren't charging recklessly. They were pushing forward like a tide, step by step, their weapons steady, their eyes locked on their prey. The alien lines buckled. Panic spread. Soldiers began to fire wildly, wasting ammunition on shadows. Zareth ordered orbital support, but the request came back denied. High Command feared that destroying the city from above would only fuel human resistance across the planet. As the last of the plaza's defenses fell, Xerath finally gave the retreat. Order. But it was too late for many. The humans didn't chase every fleeing alien. They didn't have to. The message was already clear. They could strike anywhere, at any time, and nothing, not armor, not air power, not numbers, could save their enemy once the hunt began. When night fell, Xerath's surviving forces limped back to their fortified sector. The city was still burning behind them, and somewhere in the smoke, the sound of those drums continued, slow and steady, as if marking the countdown to the end. Xerath had fought in wars across a dozen worlds, but never had he felt this. The crushing weight of knowing his enemy was already inside his mind, shaping his every move. Xerath had seen desperate battles before. He had commanded forces on planets where the sky burned for months, where cities fell in hours, where defenders threw themselves into hopeless charges. But this was different. Humans were not desperate. Anymore, they were hunting. The first sign came at dawn. The alien defensive perimeter, carefully reinforced overnight, went silent. Patrols didn't report in. Sensors showed no movement. For a brief moment, Xerath thought perhaps the humans were finally giving them space to regroup. Then the first explosion tore through the eastern wall. It wasn't a missile strike. It was from inside the perimeter. Human fighters had slipped through the shadows hours before and buried explosives under the barricades. Within seconds, 3 more detonations ripped apart key defenses. The assault that followed was unlike anything the aliens had faced since landing on Earth. It wasn't a frontal attack. It was everywhere at once. Humans flooding in from multiple directions, emerging from tunnels, storm drains, and even the wreckage of alien vehicles they had hollowed out and used as cover. The noise was overwhelming. Gunfire echoed from every direction, mingled with the roar of engines and the deep, guttural battle cries of human warriors. In the chaos, the aliens could not tell where the main force was. Every time they turned to repel one wave, another crashed. Into their flank, Xerath tried to coordinate his troops, but the comms were swamped with panicked voices. Units were calling for reinforcements, begging for orders, or simply screaming before their signals went dead. It wasn't just the humans' firepower, it was the speed, the precision, the refusal to give the enemy a moment to think. Then came the moment that would stay with Xerath for the rest of his life. The humans breached the central command bunker. Instead of flooding it with gunfire, they moved with eerie calm, clearing rooms one by one. They didn't shout, didn't celebrate. They simply advanced. One of them stepped into Xerath's command room, a tall figure in battered armor. The visor of their helmet cracked, but their stance unshaken. The human's voice was calm, almost conversational. "You wanted war," they said. "Now you have our war." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was crushing. It was not a threat. It was a promise that there was no going back. Outside, the battle raged on. Humans boarded alien dropships before they could lift off, tossing grenades into cockpits. Others scaled the sides of heavy walkers, ripping open maintenance panels and disabling them with nothing but stolen tools. Every alien defense was being dismantled piece by piece, not by overwhelming firepower, but by sheer will. By nightfall, the once secure alien base was a burning ruin. Then surviving soldiers retreated into the wilderness, scattered and leaderless. Overhead, alien warships tried to provide cover fire. But human anti-air units, some built from scavenged alien parts, forced them higher and higher into the atmosphere. In the smoldering ruins of the base, the humans stood together in the firelight. They didn't cheer. They didn't rest. They simply reloaded, patched their wounds, and prepared for the next fight. It was as if this victory was just one step on a much longer path. And Xerath, watching from the safety of an orbiting warship, finally understood the truth. The humans weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for domination. The war was over, though no one had signed any treaty. Xerath's fleet still hung in orbit, its weapons ready, its soldiers restless, but the order to attack never came. High Command had gone silent after receiving Xerath's last report. Perhaps they were debating. Perhaps they were afraid to admit. What he already knew, that holding this planet was impossible. From orbit, the Earth looked peaceful. Blue oceans, green continents, a swirl of white clouds. No one looking at it from afar would guess that entire cities were rubble, that millions had died, that the streets below still echoed with the aftermath of battle. Xerath stood in the command chamber, staring at the holographic display of the planet. Around him, officers whispered in low, tense voices. Every report told the same story. Human resistance cells had grown stronger, not weaker. Every alien retreat was followed by an immediate human advance. Even the most heavily fortified zones were now vulnerable. But it wasn't just the fighting that unnerved him. It was the pattern. The humans had stopped attacking without warning. Now, before every major strike, they sent a signal not to negotiate, not to threaten, but to warn. Sometimes it was a short broadcast of music, sometimes a voice reading coordinates. Sometimes just silence followed by the slow beat of drums, and every time that signal came, death followed. Xerath had ordered his forces to ignore it at first. That was a mistake. The signal was never a bluff. Every marked position fell within hours. Now, standing aboard his warship, Xerath heard that signal himself. A faint, rhythmic thud over the comms, like a heartbeat echoing in the void. His officers froze. The coordinates came seconds later. They matched the exact position of his orbital fleet. "They can't reach us here," one of his lieutenants said, but the confidence in their voice was brittle. Then, on the outer edges of the fleet, explosions bloomed. Not massive blasts, surgical strikes, targeting weapons arrays, engines, and life support. Human craft, small and fast, had slipped past orbital defenses, using the debris fields as cover. They weren't trying to destroy the fleet all at once, they were crippling it. One by one, ships went dark. Xerath ordered a full retreat, but the humans didn't chase. They simply pulled back, letting the fleet limp away, wounded but alive. It was deliberate, a message by the time they were safely out of the system. The meaning was clear that humans wanted them to leave and tell the story in the quiet of his private quarters. Xerath recorded his final report for High Command. His voice was steady, but the words carried a weight that no military manual could measure. "Do not return to Earth," he said. "Do not engage humans unless you seek the end of your armies. They do not fight for victory as we understand it. They fight until the enemy is gone. I have seen their fury. I have seen the way they turn war into something worse than war. If we challenge them again, it will not be a battle. It will be an extinction." He sent the transmission and sat in silence for a long time, watching the distant stars. Somewhere far behind him, Earth spun in its quiet orbit, looking small and harmless. But Xerath knew better, because in the darkness of space, he could still hear it, the slow, steady beat of human war drums.